Have you ever thought about how the length of your life might change the way you see everything? In Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, lifespan isn't just a number. It's the lens through which every character understands the world. What matters, what doesn't, what to hold on to and what to let go. Humans live for roughly 80 years. Dwarves for a few centuries. Elves for over 1,000. Demons live long as well. Same world, same road, completely different relationship with time. Today, we're going to look at the characters in this series through that lens. Not just what they do, but why their lifespan shapes the way they do it.
私たちの時間は永遠に近いのだから。
Elves live long enough that entire human lifetimes can pass in what feels like a season. That kind of time gives them patience, mastery, and perspective. But it also gives them something harder to talk about. Perfect memory. Frieren remembers everything. Every person she has met, every spell she has seen cast, every conversation from centuries ago. For a human, memories fade, grief softens, joy dims, and time does its quiet work of making the past bearable. For an elf, none of that happens. Which raises a question. How do you carry 1,000 years of loss and still keep moving? One possibility is detachment. Elves feel, they remember. But perhaps when every memory stays perfectly sharp across centuries, a certain distance from it all becomes the only way to keep going. Frieren has lived for over 1,000 years. A 10-year adventure with Himmel's party was, by her own admission, just 10 years.
みんなとの冒険だって私の人生の100分の1にも満たない。
She didn't think much of it at the time. That changes when Himmel dies. Standing at his funeral, she realizes she never truly tried to know him. She had been there for every moment. She remembers all of it. And somehow, she still missed him entirely. What follows is her correction. She begins to pay attention to the people in front of her. She notices Fern's smile during a sunrise. She spends months searching for a flower Himmel once mentioned. Her magic reflects centuries of accumulated attention. Mana concealment, practiced so long it became instinct, and the ability to read and counter spells she has seen cast across 1,000 years. Her greatest achievement, in the end, isn't a spell. It's learning very late what the people around her were actually worth. Serie is older than Frieren, and she chose a different answer to the same problem. Where Frieren collected spells out of curiosity, Serie collected them out of purpose. She founded the Continental Magic Association. She became a living grimoire, someone who knows almost every spell known to humanity. Her lifespan became an institution. She views magic as a tool for killing. She dismissed the flower spell Flamme loved as useless. Her pragmatism runs so deep it has become a kind of coldness. But she remembers. Despite appearing indifferent, she retains the personalities and favourite spells of every apprentice she has encountered across centuries. An elf who seems to feel nothing, quietly holding on to everything. Kraft chose solitude. Centuries of life led him to one question. What happens to the things you did once everyone who witnessed them is gone? He performs good deeds, hoping the goddess will remember them on his behalf. He doesn't expect reward. He just doesn't want to disappear entirely. Of all the elves in this series, Kraft is the most emotionally present. He socializes. He offers warmth. His loneliness comes not from a lack of connection, but from having outlived everyone he was ever connected to.
ねえフリーレン。人生をかけて探したものが何の価値もないゴミだった時のことを想像できる？
Milliarde spent centuries pursuing something, And when she finally had nothing left to pursue, she just stopped caring. She wrote a false inscription on a legendary spirit just to give herself something to do while the centuries passed. Fass spent over 200 years chasing that inscription. Milliarde created it to pass the time. That kind of difference only makes sense when one life stretches far beyond the other. The 4 elves in this series are 4 different answers to the same problem. Frieren learns to connect. Kraft searches for meaning. Serie builds something that outlasts her. Milliarde drifts. None of them found a complete answer, and all of them remember perfectly every step of the path that brought them here.
先生はいつも判断がとても早かった。まるで何かにせかされているみたいに。
Humans know deep down that time will eventually take everything. That knowledge shapes how they live, how hard they work, what they protect, and what they choose to leave behind. They cannot remember forever, but they can leave something that lasts longer than they do.
でも、一番の理由は、君が未来で一人ぼっちにならないようにするためかな。
Himmel understood that 80 years is not very long, and decided to make each one count. Throughout the 10 years they travelled together, he left behind things that would outlast him. Statues, memories, a ring placed on an elf's finger that she would not understand for decades. He helped people on the road when there was no strategic reason to. He insisted on detours. He wanted the journey to become something worth remembering. And even after the Demon King fell, he kept going, still stepping outside, still choosing to be useful whenever he could. What Frieren slowly discovers is that Himmel saw her clearly from the beginning. He understood parts of her that she had not yet learned to name, and left enough behind that his presence could still reach her long after he was gone.
いいかフリーレン、歴史に名を残そうなんて考えるなよ。目立たず生きろ。お前が歴史に名を残すのは魔王をぶっ殺す時だ。
Flamme is the human who planned furthest ahead of all. She taught Frieren magic, mana concealment, how to fight, and, apparently, seduction techniques. She raised her until she died of old age. She visited Oriol, the land where souls rest after death, and documented everything. Then, she sealed the notes inside a sapling with a protection spell, and left Frieren a message. When you realize you've made a grave mistake and want to know people better.
そん時はここに帰ってこいって言ってんだ。手助けしてやる。この大魔法使い、フランメ様が。
Flamme knew, centuries in advance, that one day Frieren would regret not knowing the people around her. And she left a path forward for when that day came.
あなたの旅に連れて行ってくれませんか。
Heiter was the corrupt priest who loved alcohol, and also the person who spent his final years making sure Fern would survive. He tricked Frieren into training Fern for years. He used what time he had left to set someone else's future in place. He believed in heaven, because the alternative was harder to carry. After Himmel's death, he didn't stop. He spent years corresponding with Eisen, researching holy city records, tracking down the real location of Flamme's notes. 2 humans and a dwarf, across decades and death, passing a single thread to an elf who would carry it the rest of the way.
いずれではハイター様が死んでしまう。
Fern works as though she is always behind schedule. She trains obsessively, masters mana concealment and speed casting at a level that surprises even experienced mages. When Frieren wastes time, on mimics, on detours, on useless spells, Fern is the one who reminds her, sometimes impatiently, that the road is still long.
フリーレン様、1週間までですよ。
But that urgency has a root. Fern lost her parents at a young age, and in the aftermath of that loss, Heiter found her. He told her to stay alive for the sake of keeping the good memories she had. And she did. She dedicated herself completely to magic, not just to survive, but to prove to Heiter before he died that he could leave without worrying about her.
シュタルク、魔物との戦闘経験は？
ゼロだよ！助けてくれよ、フリーレン！
Stark is afraid of almost everything, but he shows up anyway, every time, shaking hands and all. His goal is simple, to bring Eisen stories worth telling.
やっぱり俺はゴリラを追いかけるよ。もう後悔するつもりはないんだ。
Sein left, because humans do not have the luxury of endless delay. His childhood friend had been gone for 10 years already, and the only clue he found led away from Frieren's path.
黄金に変えられた故郷を救うために立ち向かうだなんて。まるでおとぎ話の英雄みたいじゃないか。
Denken arrives at the first-class mage exam with no ambition left to prove. He has buried a wife. He has fought battles he doesn't need to talk about. But his wife's grave is in a city that only first-class mages can enter. So, at his age, with everything else done, he sits the exam.
道は必ずこの私が切り開くと。人類最強であるこの南の勇者が。
The hero of the South is perhaps the most quietly devastating portrait of what a short life can produce when it is completely given over to something larger than itself. He was a human with the ability to see the future, and he saw his own death coming. He fought anyway. In that battle, he killed Schlacht, the Demon King's advisor, along with 3 of the 7 sages of destruction, clearing the path for Himmel's party to reach the Demon King. What connects all of them is not heroism or talent, but a particular kind of clarity that comes from knowing the clock is running. Humans in this series don't waste time the way elves sometimes can. They can't afford to. Dwarves live long enough to master things, but not long enough to forget that time still runs out. That creates something distinctive. Patience shaped by urgency, and commitment that can last for centuries. Eisen spent his long life becoming one of the greatest warriors of his age, and when fighting was no longer his path, he passed that strength on to Stark. In old age, he still visits his family's graves and prays, one of the small habits he carried forward from a friend, whose time ended much sooner than his own.
昔から村を魔物や魔族から守ってもらっているが、その理由もわからない。
Old man Voll spent centuries protecting a single village, quietly keeping a promise he once made to his human wife, long after the people who first gave that promise meaning were gone.
ボースハフトを飲むのはわしの夢なんだ。200年以上も探してきたんだ。
Fass spent more than 200 years chasing Bosshaft, an awful drink he believed to be the finest spirit, pursued long enough to become part of who he was.
橋ができるのは早くともお前が寿命で死んでからだ。
対価はフリーレンが受け取るさ。
Gehen village was destroyed because troops could not cross the canyon in time. So, he spent 200 years building a bridge. By the time it was finished, the village had already been rebuilt. Himmel knew he would never see it completed, but still gave Gehen the money to continue, because one day, Frieren would cross it. What dwarves share is endurance, a goal, a promise, a habit, a bridge. They carry things forward long after a human life would have ended, sometimes even after the reason itself has faded. Demons live far longer than most races, yet longevity does not make them wiser. Unlike elves, demons do not grow through time. They refine themselves instead, sharpening one strength until it reaches perfection. Aura devoted ages to refining a single spell. She could not imagine someone concealing mana for 1,000 years, because for demons, visible mana defines hierarchy and often survival. Her certainty cost her everything.
では、最後に私からの助言だ。生存者の確認はもっとしっかりやった方がいい。
Revolte spent his long life studying human patterns, how they moved, what they feared, how they fought. He fought with 4 swords shaped by long experience, yet still lost, because patterns can be studied. But battle is often decided in moments no pattern fully predicts. That pattern repeats across demons, ancient, precise, and extraordinarily capable. What they struggle to do is grow beyond what already works. What they cannot model is care. And in a world that keeps changing, that becomes the one weakness time cannot erase. If you want the full breakdown of demon behaviour, there's a separate video on the channel. Every species in Frieren's world lives within a different scale of time and remembers differently because of it. Humans forget, but still build. Dwarves remember long enough to finish what they begin. Elves remember everything. Demons, by contrast, remember nothing that changes them. And that may be what the series keeps returning to. Time matters less than what you learn to notice while it passes. Himmel understood that within 80 years. Frieren took 1,000 years to understand why it mattered.
でもやっぱりイケメンポーズ集はいらなかったかな。記憶の無駄遣いだ。